I watched you last night on The Talk, and I know this subject came up then, Isabel. These WhatsApp messages, of which there are, it would seem, gazillions, for want of a better word. You know from the Matt Hancock experience that he had millions of them. How many of these WhatsApp messages are they going to be getting their hands on?
Well, nowhere near as many as they would like, and that will still probably be more than they can cope with. I mean, what there is here is an enormous logistical problem for the COVID inquiry if they get what they want, versus the not at all surprising reluctance of ministers and ex-ministers and their advisors who are not willing to just hand over reams and reams of these messages. And the reason is because a lot of the stuff in there will be dynamite.
Right.
I know it will be. Having seen what's in the Matt Hancock WhatsApps, and of course the Daily Telegraph in the Lockdown Files expose only published what was demonstrably in the public interest. So have a think about what might have been in there that was left out, right, which would be very publicly interesting, but doesn't meet the journalistic bar of public interest. Well, you can just imagine how all these other politicians are feeling as they try to go back through their messages. I mean, there's just far too much stuff there for them to get through. I do worry that a lot of those who have been asked to hand over their messages will have deleted them or will be busy deleting them now.
Well, this is the problem, isn't it? Baroness Hallett has already said that she might actually proffer criminal charges against some of these ministers if they refuse to cooperate. But we already know from Lord Bethell, for example, that he already somehow managed to delete all of his WhatsApp messages because he said he transferred his phone and incredibly he didn't know how to move the messages over. So, I mean, there's very easy get-out clauses.
Came up with about 3 different excuses for why his WhatsApps were missing. Right. Certainly in the Matt Hancock messages, pretty much the whole of March 2020 was missing in an extremely suspicious way. So, look, politicians are going to delete or will already have deleted a lot of the raw material. I think Baroness Hallett, who's trying really hard to do a job in virtually impossible circumstances, should issue a clear warning to anyone who deletes their WhatsApp messages or other informal government records which are pertinent to the inquiry, that that is an offence to her inquiry and that they have a civic duty to hand that material over.
And you see this differently to the whole Boris Johnson diary checkers story, don't you? Because it's not, because I think I'm in agreement with you on this, that, you know, I don't really care about what happened at Chequers, but I do care about what happened during COVID.
Absolutely. I am so tired of the narrative about Boris Johnson and his illegal gatherings, whatever they may be. I think we now all know beyond any reasonable doubt that he broke his own rules on multiple occasions. Yeah. He's no longer Prime Minister. He's paid a heavy political price for what he did. I don't see any gain whatsoever from further investigations. It's a stupid waste of police time. And actually, the police should push back and say, you know what, in a world of limited resources, let's just leave this one.
Yeah, absolutely right. Now, I don't know whether you've had a look at The Sun this morning, but they've got a story on their page 23 about Calvin Klein being the latest company to sort of go woke with a ridiculous-looking advert showing 2 men, transgender men, modelling a sports bra. It's possibly one of the most unattractive ads I've ever seen, and it takes me back to all those years ago when Calvin Klein actually used to do quite cool ads. I used to quite like looking at them because they were in black and white and they were quite sexy.
Yeah, they were gorgeous,
and they made you look and they made you think, oh, maybe I'll go and buy some of that stuff.
Right. I mean, adverts are supposed to be aspirational. That's the point, that they pull you in, they make you want to be like the characters in the adverts, the models, and so on. And Nike very recently got itself into all sorts of trouble by doing almost exactly the same thing. And it backfired on them. And brands that go down this route, I think, are taking a very, very high-risk strategy. You know, Victoria's Secret is another one that suffered hugely. Its brand suffered a lot during the Me Too years because it was seen to be kind of sexist and promoting the wrong things, and then swung too far the other way and is busy promoting all sorts of plus-size figures and, you know, body positivity and all of that. people don't buy beautiful lingerie on the basis that it looks good on the fattest of models. You know, they want to imagine that they are like a Victoria's Secret angel.
Yes.
And I just hate all this stuff. It's an absolute nonsense.
It really is. But you have to wonder what's going on in the heads of the people at these companies, because they must have seen what's happened to places like Bud Light and even to Adidas, and where people are saying we're going to boycott them, we're not going to buy their stuff anymore. You know, the general public, much like those that don't want mass immigration into this country, are not interested.
Well, what's perhaps going on in the minds of those people that sit round a table and say, wouldn't it be a great idea if we used a trans person to advertise a sports bra, is that they'll get loads of free publicity because people like you and I will be frothing at the mouth and debating it. And as a result, they get loads of free advertising. So maybe they sell some more sports bras to a few trans people. I don't know.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I suspect that they will lose more customers than they will gain from this.
Yes. Now, I was interested in a piece that you tweeted out about. Well, I'm not going to ask you about it now because we'll maybe talk about it another time, but you talk about the NHS and how they could learn a thing or two from Dubai. Are you able to give us a little taste of that?
I would love to talk about that in more detail when we've got more time, but in brief, didn't expect to have a experience of healthcare in Dubai when I was there for work last week. The treatment there, the efficiency is extraordinary. It wasn't very expensive. I had to pay as you go. But for a couple of £100, I was able to get an enormous number of very detailed tests. Yeah. I also had 45 minutes with a doctor, more than I've seen with a NHS GP probably for the last 5 years combined. That was all less than £200. And was then able to get follow-ups, including a bone scan, actually on site. You know, when you ask them, how do I make that appointment? How long will it take? How do I get the results? You are met with bewildered stares. It all happens right away.
Immediately, yeah. Well, I've always found this whenever I've been abroad, not so much now because I'm a bit older and slightly more intelligent and cleverer, but my kids were always ending up in hospital in some place or other wherever we were on holiday. And it was always better everywhere, no matter whether it was Italy or Mexico or America or Spain or France, it was always better the experience than any NHS experience I'd ever had with them.
Yes, and maybe you have to hand over 30 quid, 40 quid, 50 quid. Maybe you have to hand over, as I did, ultimately, almost £500. But I got an amount of treatment in the space of a day or two that would take months and frankly isn't obtainable here. And the funny thing is, it isn't even readily and efficiently available in the private sector here. A lot of NHS patients are opting out of the NHS in desperation, using their life savings to pay for treatment, and then they are meeting with this horrible reality, which is that the private sector here is also swamped. Why? Because we're using the same tiny pool of doctors and nurses for the NHS and in the private sector. We simply do not have enough healthcare professionals.
No, it's a shocking state of affairs. But Isabel, listen, thanks very much indeed, and nice to see you again. Isabel Oakeshott, TalkTV's international editor there, talking about a great many things, including